I am Clara Connolly, 32, a senior financial analyst. Christmas Eve, my sister, Jocelyn, was handed keys to a luxury condo. My gift? My father casually tossed a 12-month lease for a downtown storage unit. $1 million home versus a glorified closet. It was the most brutal, public appraisal of my value to them. I didn't cry. I accepted their valuation. But accepting their valuation didn't mean I was done. It meant the real, chilling financial audit of their lives was about to begin. Did I find proof of their betrayal? Long before the condo key shattered my Christmas, I was their financial backup plan. My parents, Victor and Eliza, saw my senior financial analyst title not as my achievement, but as their unlimited credit line. I managed their bills, paid Jocelyn's rent before she got her luxury condo, and rescued them from numerous financial holes. My job was to ensure their comfortable, irresponsible lifestyle never faced real consequences. I was the reliable, invisible asset. Jocelyn, meanwhile, was the golden child, free from the burden of making money, only responsible for spending it. Her life was pure consumption. Mine was pure calculus. This dynamic, the martyr and the monarch, was the foundation of the Connolly family. But how does an invisible asset discover they've not just been undervalued, but actively robbed? In the family photo album, Jocelyn was always the subject, the bright center. I was the invisible anchor, the background noise that kept the whole picture from falling apart. My financial success, my rigorous analysis, my six-figure salary? To Victor and Eliza, these were just proofs of my utility, not my value. They consistently rewarded Jocelyn's charm and irresponsibility while demanding absolute, silent competence from me. I was the reliable, profitable stock they never bothered to appreciate. That Christmas gift, the condo versus the storage unit, was the ultimate manifestation of this calculus. It quantified years of emotional neglect. It was the moment their subconscious contempt became irrefutable. Physical evidence. But they made a crucial error. They assumed the senior financial analyst would simply internalize the slight. They failed to realize that when you show an analyst their final valuation, they immediately start looking for fraud. What damning discovery did I uncover in the financial statements that proved their betrayal was not just emotional, but criminal? While Jocelyn chased the latest fashion trends, I found my passion in cold, hard logic. I fell in love with financial analysis, the power to predict, to control, to build something impenetrable with nothing but data. For me, a balance sheet wasn't just numbers, it was a blueprint for true independence. This dedication separated me early, not just professionally, but philosophically. My greatest joy was self-sufficiency. This passion for structure was misunderstood at home. My parents saw my financial discipline as a resource for them, not a tool for me. They valued status, I valued solvency. That foundational conflict was always there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment, or the right cruel gift, to boil over. What was the most manipulative thing my parents said to dismiss my career, and how did their favoritism finally push me to a breaking point? Their opposition wasn't loud, it was insidious. Every time I mentioned a promotion, my father would sigh, "It's good you're making money, Clara, someone has to be responsible." Every time Jocelyn maxed out a credit card, my mother would coo, "Oh, my poor little artist. We'll handle it." I was their safety net, but they treated the net itself like cheap, industrial mesh, necessary, but never beautiful. The emotional debt was mounting, but I kept covering the interest payments with my silence. The condo key was the last straw. It was their definitive statement: Jocelyn gets the life of value, Clara gets the space for clutter. The look on my father's face when he threw the lease at me, a mix of casual dismissal and mild annoyance, was far worse than any yell. He didn't even pretend. That was the moment I realized they weren't just undervaluing me, they were gifting my humiliation publicly. That profound contempt activated my analyst brain. Time to audit the books. Did their deceit stop at emotional exploitation, or did my audit uncover something far more criminal, forgery and theft? The drive home was silent, but my mind was screaming. The comparison, $1 million life for Jocelyn, a storage fee for me, was a punch to my very core. They didn't just prefer her, they saw me as an extension of their debt portfolio, a resource they could exploit without thanks. The storage unit lease wasn't a gift, it was a physical manifestation of their opinion. I was the holding place for their inconvenience and clutter. The rage was blinding, but beneath it was a sickening despair. I was replaceable. That night, the relationship ceased being familial and became purely transactional. If they wanted to treat me like an asset, then I would start acting like a CEO protecting shareholder value. The game wasn't about love anymore. It was about due diligence. I was going to find out how they afforded that condo, and if they thought I was just a storage unit, they were about to find out I was a legal demolition crew. What dark secrets did my financial audit expose about the Connolly family's wealth, and was the condo purchased with my stolen assets? The humiliation of the storage unit was the catalyst, but my response was pure, disciplined analysis. I spent the next 72 hours conducting a forensic audit, tracing every joint account, every recurring payment I made for them, and every investment they advised me on. I needed a strategy to sever the financial umbilical cord cleanly. The goal was simple: complete financial and emotional autonomy. I would maintain my strength by exposing their financial fragility. Data was my shield. Numbers don't lie, and they certainly don't play favorites. My analysis confirmed what I had always suspected: they were highly dependent, deeply reckless, and completely blind to the fact that I held all the leverage. But what I found next wasn't just dependency, it was a paper trail of forgery. Could I really turn my parents into criminal suspects to save myself? The deepest betrayal wasn't the storage unit, it was the chilling feeling that maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe my rigorous, profitable life was less worthy than Jocelyn's decorative existence. I had poured my self-worth into achievement, hoping to finally earn the same easy affection she received for simply existing. The condo key symbolized effortless status, the storage unit symbolized my constant, draining effort to simply break even on familial love. The comparison was a psychological drain. I almost rationalized the betrayal. Well, Jocelyn needs the condo more than a financial analyst does. That's how toxic systems work, they make you doubt your own need for basic respect. But the analyst in me screamed, injustice is an unacceptable risk. What was the precise moment I stopped doubting my worth and started using my financial skills to prove they were not just cruel, but criminal? I stared at the lease, the ultimate symbol of their perception. The scale was tipped wildly. Jocelyn got an investment, I got an expense. But my integrity demanded balance. If I allowed this public slight to pass, I was validating their years of neglect. I realized that justice wasn't a philosophical concept, it was an actionable financial correction. My ethical responsibility to myself outweighed any familial obligation. I had to stop subsidizing their delusion. I wasn't seeking petty revenge, I was seeking accountability. As a financial analyst, my mission was to reconcile the statements, to make the numbers reflect the truth. The Connolly family was deeply in the red, not just financially, but ethically. It was time for a forced liquidation of my emotional assets. Did I immediately confront them, or did I strategically wait until I had irrefutable evidence of their forgery and the full scope of their financial collapse? The isolation after Christmas was crushing. I couldn't process the condo versus storage unit slap alone. I needed an ally, someone who spoke the language of logic and law. I called Sarah, a corporate lawyer from my firm and the only friend I trusted with the grim details of the Connolly family balance sheet. Sitting across from her, the sheer absurdity of the storage unit gift finally hit me, and I felt the mask of the competent analyst crack. I felt vulnerable, but for the first time, not weak. Clara, this isn't just sibling rivalry. This is public emotional abuse with a financial price tag. Hearing those words, abuse, from an objective professional was like a sudden, cleansing rain. Sarah didn't minimize my experience, she validated my deepest fears. She helped me reframe the incident not as a personal failure, but as their final, desperate attempt at control. She saw the impenetrable firewall I was trying to build, and offered to help me construct it, brick by legal brick. Sarah looked at my initial audit results. The anomalies, the odd transfers, the signature discrepancies. "Clara," she said, "this isn't just about cutting ties. This is about protecting yourself from felony charges." Her gravity brought everything into sharp focus. The emotional war had just become a high-stakes legal operation. What was the first, most satisfying financial hammer I dropped on my family after confirming they had forged my signature to steal my investment assets? "You don't need to yell, Clara. You just need to be irrefutable." Sarah's advice was tactical and cold. We realized the key to my freedom wasn't proving my worth, but cutting their access. I had documented transfers showing they routinely diverted my investment income. We planned a phased exit, first, securing my remaining assets, second, a firm, non-negotiable cease and desist on all financial transactions, and finally, a confrontation built entirely on legal evidence, not emotion. The more evidence Sarah and I compiled, the less scared I became. The rage was replaced by a quiet, professional satisfaction. I wasn't just Clara, the daughter they dismissed, I was Clara Connolly, the senior analyst with legal backing. The time for their next bailout request was coming, and this time, the answer wouldn't be silence or a check, it would be a redirection to my attorney. Did my parents finally grasp the gravity of their crime when the first asset freeze hit? Or did their desperation for money lead them to an even more reckless act of public manipulation? Seeing the forged signatures, mine, sloppy and rushed, on legal investment documents was the definitive line crossed. This wasn't just poor parenting, it was identity theft to fund Jocelyn's luxury. Sarah made it clear, pursuing this meant legal action against my parents. The choice was stark: protect my financial future and integrity, or protect my family's criminal secret. The ethical tension was immense, but my professional instinct took over. I treated Victor and Eliza as high-risk financial actors, not as mom and dad. We calculated the cost, the stolen principal, the lost compound interest, the emotional trauma. The amount was staggering, enough to comfortably buy Jocelyn's new condo. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was years of systematic deceit. Sarah advised me to file a suspicious activity report to federal agencies. "This stops here, Clara," she warned. "Once the authorities are involved, you lose control." But I realized I had never truly had control. Taking legal action was the only way to seize the leverage they had stolen from me. The betrayal had stripped away my emotional choice. There was only one path left, the path of integrity. I signed the paperwork, initiating the process. I traded my final piece of familial hope for unassailable legal truth. The next time my parents called, they weren't asking for help, they were demanding a bailout. What was my cold, precise response that signaled the start of their financial ruin? The ultimate rebuttal to the storage unit lease wasn't yelling, it was signing a better one. With my assets secured and the legal process underway, I found a downtown apartment, smaller than Jocelyn's condo, but entirely mine. This wasn't about status, it was about laying claim to my own life. I used a portion of the funds they had stolen and I had recovered. It was an act of reclamation, the investment in myself they never made. This lease was my first, tangible step towards self-affirmation after the financial divorce. I set up my new office, stacking my financial binders high. This space wasn't an escape, it was a command center. My new personal milestone wasn't just physical. It was a commitment to emotional solvency. I wouldn't allow their narrative, that I was only valuable as a provider, to define me anymore. I was now investing solely in projects that had a high return on personal peace. This decision required a kind of brutal self-care, cutting off all toxic inputs. The focus was forward, on my real future. Just as I unpacked the last box, my father called. Predictably, it wasn't to apologize for the forgery, but to ask for an emergency loan for Jocelyn's condo maintenance fees. The irony was palpable. The stage was set for the final, ruthless financial closing. Did my father get the emergency loan he needed, or did I deliver the ultimate audit verdict, an immediate zero-interest foreclosure on their access to my life? Clara, I need you to wire the $5,000 immediately. Jocelyn's fees are overdue, the sheer entitlement in his voice, demanding money for the sister who received the condo, while I was given a lease for glorified storage, was the final insult I needed. I took a deep breath. No more emotional debate. Only a professional transaction. Victor, all previously established financial support structures are dissolved, effective immediately. Any further communication regarding money must be directed to my attorney, Sarah Chen. I have already filed a formal dispute concerning the unauthorized signatures on my investment documents. The silence on the line was deafening. It was the sound of a system crashing, of years of easy money suddenly yanked away. I didn't wait for his inevitable, manipulative rebuttal. This is a final notice, Victor. Good luck with your financial situation, I hung up. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense, it was the ultimate, necessary financial closure. The Conley family's primary revenue stream had just been completely, legally, and permanently foreclosed. What was the desperate, shocking move my parents made next to try and manipulate me into sending money, and did it finally break my resolve? What do you mean formal dispute, Clara? This is your sister. And who is this Sarah Chen? You don't involve strangers in family matters. Don't be ridiculous, this is a temporary cash flow problem, and you know we always sort things out. Send the $5,000 now before I start to think you actually want to see your mother and me suffer. You are making a huge, career-ending mistake, financially and emotionally. His shock was satisfying. They genuinely believed their financial lifeline would never be cut. His immediate leap to emotional blackmail proved I had made the right choice. He didn't see me as a daughter, he saw me as a defective ATM. I have documented evidence of forgery. Victor. Sarah is not a stranger, she's an attorney specializing in financial crimes. My career is secure. Your access to my money is not. If you call this number again, or contact me directly, I will include harassment charges in the pending legal filings. The transaction is closed. Did they escalate their manipulation by involving Jocelyn and going public with their sob story? And how did I strategically use social media to deliver my final, devastating financial report? As predicted, their next move was emotional warfare in the public arena. Eliza posted a tearful Facebook update, not mentioning the fraud, of course, about a cruel, ungrateful daughter who was letting her younger sister lose her dream home over a few $1,000s. The pity poured in. They were painting me as the villain, using their social capital as a weapon. This public manipulation was infuriating, but it was also a strategic opening. Sarah and I knew they had just given me the platform I needed for my final, devastating financial report. I didn't respond with emotion. I responded with data. We prepared a concise statement, backed by verifiable public records of their financial delinquency, the stolen principal, and the forged documents. I was going to turn their public pity party into a public audit. They wanted a drama. I gave them a Securities and Exchange Commission filing. My revenge would be the truth, delivered with the cold precision of a professional closing a fraudulent business. What happened when the truth, the verifiable proof of their fraud, hit social media, and how did the community's reaction instantly shift from pity for them to pure rage? Sarah reviewed the legal aspects, but the decision to hit post was mine alone. This move would officially sever every remaining thread of familial connection. It meant accepting the label of the ungrateful, cruel daughter from my community, permanently. But sitting in my new, quiet apartment, reviewing the irrefutable evidence of the forgery and theft, I realized my independence was more valuable than their approval. My only true loyalty was to financial integrity and myself. I was the one who had to live with the truth. My post wasn't a rant, it was a highly professional, clinical exposé. I provided links to public records and blurred bank statements, outlining the financial damage caused by the fraudulent activities, and confirmed that legal action had been taken to recover stolen assets. This was my statement of value, my final audit report on the Connolly family. I looked at the screen, paused for a moment of quiet resolve, and pressed enter. The financial war was now fully public. What was the immediate, chaotic fallout from my parents and sister when my post went viral, and how did the truth shatter the illusion of the golden child forever? The internet doesn't care about familial sentiment, it cares about verifiable data. My clinical, evidence-based post cut through their tearful narrative like a laser. Within hours, the narrative flipped. The people who had been pitying Eliza were now asking serious questions about forgery and securities violations. The comments section turned into a public jury. My parents' public image, the one Jocelyn used to leverage her condo lifestyle, was now a liability. Their facade of respectability was collapsing under the weight of my audit report. The most delicious part? Jocelyn, the golden child, was exposed not as a talented artist, but as the beneficiary of felony fraud. Her expensive condo, the symbol of her effortless privilege, was now a monument to her parents' criminal negligence. Sarah called me, not to advise, but to simply say, "The market has reacted, Clara. Your valuation is secure." The silence from my family was the sound of my emotional liberation. The debt was settled, not with money, but with unavoidable truth. How did the loss of their public reputation directly translate into financial ruin, and what final, satisfying move did I take to ensure they faced the true, unyielding consequences of their actions? I hadn't seen my family in person since the legal filings and the public audit. The annual arts fundraiser was their sanctuary, the very place they used to flaunt their undeserved status. Walking in felt like stepping onto a financial battlefield. Every eye in the room pivoted toward me, then nervously toward Victor and Eliza, who were huddled in a corner, their usual grand confidence replaced by the jittery tension of high-risk debtors. Their social capital had depreciated drastically. The public now saw them not as patrons, but as embezzlers. Victor, emboldened by panic, marched toward me. "Clara, this fraud claim is baseless slander. Fix this now, or we'll ruin your career. The evidence is public, Victor. I suggest you direct all baseless claims to Sarah Chen. Your career is already a non-performing asset." That was the turning point. I didn't raise my voice. I used the language of the market, and in that room, the financial truth was the loudest statement of all. Did Victor try one last, desperate attempt at fatherly manipulation, or did the arrival of an unexpected third party shatter their remaining power entirely? Before Victor could recover, Jocelyn swooped in, tears ready, the ultimate performance artist. "Clara, please, I don't understand the legal stuff. You're my big sister, you have to help us. They're saying we might lose the condo, your Christmas gift to me." Her performance, tailored for the gallery crowd, was instantly sickening. It wasn't about the law, it was about leveraging a lifetime of emotional debt. I looked past her performative tears and saw the cold, self-serving logic. She truly believed I owed her everything. My emotional response was absolute zero, complete, clean, financial detachment. "Jocelyn, I was given a storage unit lease. You received stolen investment funds." Talk to Sarah. That moment of cold, public clarity was interrupted. A man in a conservative suit stepped toward Victor and Eliza, displaying a badge. He wasn't Sarah's associate. He was from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The look on my parents' faces, raw, naked terror, confirmed the game was truly over. The financial closure I sought had just gained federal authority. Did the SEC official immediately arrest them in front of the entire elite society? Or did they have one last, futile attempt to shift the blame onto me? We walked out quickly, leaving the chaos for the SEC and the Conleys to manage. Standing on the quiet street, under the single pale streetlight, the rush wore off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Sarah didn't offer platitudes, she just handed me a bottle of water. "It's done, Clara. Legally, financially. You protected your assets." Her simple validation was everything. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about survival. The feeling was pure, unadulterated relief, the feeling of finally closing a 10-year-long, high-interest account that had been bleeding my life dry. Then came the grief. It wasn't for the parents they were, but for the parents I desperately wished they had been. The love I sought was never real, it was a projected liability, a line item on their balance sheet. I let out a shaky breath, realizing the only thing I truly lost tonight was the illusion of a normal family. I looked at Sarah, my genuine, chosen family, and the silence conveyed more than words ever could. It was a silent acknowledgement of the decade of emotional theft I had endured. "The next chapter is yours, Clara." Pure profit, I smiled, a real smile, the first one in months. The cold determination was gone, replaced by a warm sense of clarity and gratitude. I was free. I had the means to rebuild, and more importantly, I had a trusted ally standing right beside me. The revenge story was over. The recovery story was just beginning. I had exchanged a toxic family debt for unlimited personal equity. With the SEC investigation underway and the emotional debt cleared, what was the first, luxurious, truly independent purchase I made that served as a final, quiet celebration of my freedom? The last piece of the Conley family's control was the lease to the storage unit, the ultimate symbol of their rejection. I drove there alone, bolt cutters in hand. I wasn't retrieving memories, I was executing a symbolic foreclosure. Cutting the heavy lock wasn't just physical action, it was the final, satisfying snap of the emotional chain that had bound me for decades. The feeling was pure, unadulterated power. They had tried to box up my life, I was now dismantling their power structure, one piece of rusty metal at a time. Inside, there was nothing worth saving. Just dusty, discarded trinkets. I realized the true value wasn't in the objects, but in the empty space they now occupied. I was finally done chasing their validation. The lease was terminated. The emotional account was closed, zero balance. What was the quiet, luxurious celebration I shared with Sarah that proved I was finally investing in my own happiness? And how did I ensure my parents got a final, unintended notification of my success? The headlines were everywhere, detailing the SEC's findings, the forged signatures, the wire fraud, the elaborate scheme to loot my inheritance for Jocelyn's condo. The truth was out. It wasn't just my perspective anymore, it was public record, backed by federal authority. I didn't feel triumph, I felt a cold, hard recognition. The betrayal wasn't a sudden event, it was a decade-long financial policy designed to benefit the golden child at my expense. Every kind gesture, every holiday cheer, it had all been calculated to maintain the revenue stream. The greatest pain wasn't the stolen money, it was knowing my parents valued my money more than my integrity. Jocelyn wasn't just complicit. She was the reason the crime existed. The truth had revealed the ultimate betrayal. I was never truly their daughter, I was their silent partner, the unwilling underwriter of their fraud. Accepting that required burying the final remnants of hope. But burying that hope was the ultimate act of self-liberation. Did the revelation of the full truth lead to criminal charges for my parents? And what was the final, non-negotiable term I demanded to ensure my long-term personal and financial safety? The SEC settled for a massive financial penalty, Clara. They had to liquidate assets, including the equity from Jocelyn's condo. No jail time, but a permanent lifetime ban from holding certain financial positions. Victor and Eliza are now effectively financially neutralized. I felt no joy in their ruin, only the satisfaction that justice was served, professionally and legally. Their consequence was irreversible. I had secured my stolen principal and interest. Now, it was time for the final, most crucial non-negotiable term, my safety. Did we file the lifetime no-contact order? I want it ironclad. No calls, no emails, no third parties attempting contact. Zero exceptions. This wasn't about revenge, it was about building a permanent firewall between their toxic chaos and my new life. Sarah confirmed the order was in place. The family revenge story ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, final legal injunction. My future was not just financially secure, it was emotionally sealed. What were the last, desperate attempts Jocelyn made to contact me through social media after the no-contact order was finalized? And how did I finally find peace in my new, self-made financial freedom? The no-contact order didn't stop Jocelyn. She was desperate. New social media accounts popped up daily, sending frantic DMs begging for a meeting, claiming I was ruining her life and that the SEC was just a big misunderstanding. The manipulation was still there, but without the financial leverage, it was pathetic. I didn't feel rage, I felt a dull pity for the woman who couldn't grasp that the privilege train had derailed permanently. I instantly documented and forwarded every message to Sarah. My boundaries were non-negotiable, and they were legally protected. The final step of my independence wasn't about filing a lawsuit, it was about protecting my inner peace. I went through all my social media and implemented the ultimate comprehensive block. I deleted my personal email, started fresh, and changed my number. The effort they put into reaching me was the last proof I needed that they would never change. I closed my laptop. My world, once defined by their need, was now defined by my solitude and control. The family story was finally a closed ledger. Did my parents ever face jail time for their fraud? And what final, powerful lesson about self-worth did I learn from turning my biggest financial betrayal into my ultimate, self-made future? The noise was gone. No frantic calls, no desperate emails, no social media manipulation. Just the sound of the city waking up and the quiet hum of my new life. This stillness was the purest form of wealth. My parents' fate, financially neutralized by the SEC, was sealed. The revenge story had ended, and the greatest realization was that the true victory wasn't their downfall, it was my emancipation from their narrative. I was no longer the flawed daughter, I was the CEO of my own integrity. I opened my journal. The first entry wasn't a list of financial goals, but a simple statement: I forgive myself for believing I deserved the way they treated me. That was the real closure. I wasn't defined by their betrayal, but by my courage to file the complaint. My professional life thrived because my personal balance sheet was finally clean. The final lesson: you must ruthlessly audit your emotional liabilities to achieve true financial freedom. Did I ever see my parents or Jocelyn again? And what major personal milestone did I achieve 6 months later that truly cemented my independence? The noise was gone. No frantic calls, no desperate emails, no social media manipulation. Just the sound of the city waking up and the quiet hum of my new life. This stillness was the purest form of wealth. My parents' fate, financially neutralized by the SEC, was sealed. The revenge story had ended, and the greatest realization was that the true victory wasn't their downfall, it was my emancipation from their narrative. I was no longer the flawed daughter, I was the CEO of my own integrity. I opened my journal. The first entry wasn't a list of financial goals, but a simple statement: I forgive myself for believing I deserved the way they treated me. That was the real closure. I wasn't defined by their betrayal, but by my courage to file the complaint. My professional life thrived because my personal balance sheet was finally clean. The final lesson: you must ruthlessly audit your emotional liabilities to achieve true financial freedom. Did I ever see my parents or Jocelyn again? And what major personal milestone did I achieve 6 months later that truly cemented my independence? Just as I was putting on my coat, a woman whose name commands real respect in the financial world, Eleanor Vance, stopped me. She didn't offer pity or judgment. She offered a quiet nod of professional respect. I read your public statement, Clara. It takes courage to audit your own family. Integrity is rare, financial accountability is rarer still. The people ignoring you tonight are showing their fear, not your fault. I see a professional with steel and precision. I'd like to discuss a mutually beneficial investment opportunity at my firm. Her words were the antithesis of my family's toxic validation. She saw my action not as a scandal, but as an asset. It proved my ethical decision had a tangible market value. The isolation melted away. I wasn't an outcast, I was a commodity, and a highly valued one. Eleanor, I appreciate that. Please contact my attorney, Sarah Chin, to set up a formal meeting. My time is now billed at a premium. I smiled inwardly. My biggest crisis had just become my most powerful strategic opportunity. I walked out, knowing my professional future was brighter than ever. What was the incredible job offer I received from Eleanor, and how did that new success allow me to achieve a major personal milestone that was completely unthinkable just a few months earlier? 6 months into my role at Vance Associates, I wasn't just thriving, I was leading. Eleanor gave me an incredible platform, respecting my integrity and financial precision. The final, luxurious detail? My corner office had the perfect view of Jocelyn's old neighborhood, a subtle, sweet reminder of the equity I'd secured. Clara, the firm's partners just approved the budget for the new division. They gave you lead oversight. It's triple your old salary, plus significant equity bonuses. You did it, I leaned back in my leather chair. This wasn't inherited wealth, it was self-made capital. The ultimate validation wasn't the salary, it was the trust placed in my judgment. That massive success allowed me to achieve a major personal milestone I'd always dreamed of, buying my first home, a penthouse with a breathtaking, entirely unburdened view. I paid the full down payment with my own hard-earned capital, no family loan, no cosigner. I felt an unshakable sense of control. My life was no longer defined by the legacy of fraud I had escaped, but by the legacy of integrity I was building. The revenge was complete. The new portfolio was entirely mine. The most profound discovery was that they hadn't stolen my future, they had simply forced me to file a hostile takeover bid for my own life, and I won. Did I ever look back with regret? Or was the satisfaction of my financial independence the lasting, unshakable final lesson of this family revenge story? Clara, I need to inform you, Victor called my office, not breaching the order directly, but having his new, very junior lawyer ask for mediation. He's trying to leverage the family connection to get you to fund his legal defense against the SEC sanctions. He emphasized familial duty. The gall was astonishing. He faced ruin because of his own fraudulent choices, and his first instinct was still to view me as an ATM. My response was immediate and without emotion. Sarah, the answer is a definitive, non-negotiable no. My only duty is to uphold the law and my own financial integrity. I had to maintain the ethical distance. Offering them help would not have been forgiveness. It would have been co-signing their next crime, a return to the toxic dynamic. This time, the decision was purely about self-preservation. The emotional cost of engaging was higher than the financial loss they were facing. I didn't hate them, I simply viewed them as a high-risk, high-liability counterparty. Sarah ended the call with a simple understood. That was the final, clean severance. I realized my freedom was not merely the absence of them in my life, but my absolute refusal to be available to their chaos. My new life was too valuable to accept any further emotional debits. What became the ultimate, poetic fate of Jocelyn and her coveted condo, and what final, powerful statement did I make to the world about the price of integrity? I never broke the no-contact order. But Sarah, in her professional capacity, occasionally had to relay market data. One morning, she sent a one-line email. The asset has been liquidated to cover the SEC penalties. The asset? Jocelyn's condo, the physical embodiment of the stolen money and my parents' favoritism. It sold for a fraction of its market value due to the legal taint. The poetic justice was immense. The apartment purchased with fraud was now the casualty of accountability. I felt no joy, just the cold satisfaction of a balanced ledger. I imagined the scene, Jocelyn, stripped of her undeserved privilege, facing the eviction notice. The thought didn't move me. My empathy had been permanently exhausted by years of their manipulation. The ultimate confrontation wasn't between me and them, it was between them and the reality they created. They were finally forced to live by the same rules they expected me to bend. Their ruin wasn't my action, it was the natural consequence of their financial gravity. I simply stood aside and let the market forces, and the law, do their job. The case was officially closed. The family conflict had evaporated, replaced by a non-existent relationship and a zero balance on all emotional and financial accounts. What was the single, most important financial lesson I took from this entire experience? And what final advice can I give to anyone dealing with toxic, financially manipulative family members? People often ask me what the single most important financial lesson I took from this whole experience was. It wasn't about asset allocation or portfolio diversification. It was this: emotional debt is the most expensive liability on your balance sheet. My parents used my need for love as collateral for their fraud. Once I decided to default on that emotional debt and prioritize my self-worth, the financial leverage they held over me instantly vanished. You cannot secure your financial future if you don't first secure your emotional boundaries. If you are dealing with toxic, financially manipulative family members, remember, you owe them nothing. The blood is thicker than water rhetoric is just another manipulation tactic to prevent you from filing the necessary legal or emotional injunctions. Be ruthless in protecting your assets, both monetary and mental. The greatest revenge is simply building a life so successful and peaceful that their chaos can't even touch the interest income. My final, unshakable piece is the ultimate testament to the fact that integrity always yields the best long-term return. Now that you've heard my story, what is the one emotional liability you're going to audit and cut ties with today? Let me know in the comments below. The biggest lie my parents ever sold me was that blood defines family. My real family wasn't defined by shared DNA, but by shared integrity. Sitting at my own table, with Sarah and Eleanor, I felt a deep, warm sense of gratitude. Thank you both. You didn't just help me recover my money, you helped me recover my self-worth, you earned it, Clara. We just cleared the path, and wrote some excellent cease and desist letters. The laughter was genuine. This was my chosen family, a board of directors for my life, built on truth, not transaction. We talked about business, future investments, and life, topics that weren't tainted by manipulation or financial desperation. The difference was monumental. I was no longer an emotional hostage. I was a contributing partner in a network of mutual respect. This friendship was the unquantifiable asset missing from my old balance sheet. It cemented the fact that escaping the toxic relationship was the best risk mitigation strategy one could have ever taken. I felt grounded, secure, and profoundly at peace. The ultimate, final victory wasn't the SEC ruling, it was knowing I would never again confuse the liability of blood with the asset of genuine love. Looking back, if I could send one warning letter to my younger self before the betrayal began, what crucial piece of financial and emotional advice would I give? If I could send one warning letter to my younger self, it wouldn't be about the stock market or real estate. It would be, always separate your self-worth from your net worth. Your family cannot manipulate an asset that they have no emotional claim over. The moment you stop seeking their approval, their power over your wallet dissolves. My final, most powerful advice is this: if a relationship, familial or otherwise, is a persistent financial drain and an emotional debit, you must treat it like a bad investment. Cut your losses and liquidate the liability immediately. Your peace is worth the upfront cost of confrontation. My old life was a legacy of fraud. My new life is a legacy of integrity and self-made success. My revenge wasn't the loss they suffered, it was the unbreakable foundation I built for myself. I am financially free, emotionally independent, and my future is entirely under my control. That is the ultimate hostile takeover story. I hope my experience gives you the courage to conduct your own emotional and financial audit. You deserve to be the CEO of your own life. Now that you know the full price of integrity, are you ready to fire your toxic board of directors? The question wasn't if the relationship was over, but how to formally document its non-existence. Sarah and I drafted a brief, public statement. It wasn't accusatory, it was purely informational. It simply stated that all previous familial relationships involving Victor, Eliza, and Jocelyn Connolly were now legally and financially severed. The document was a firewall, not a weapon. Reading it, I felt a deep, chilling detachment. They were no longer my family but parties in a complex legal matter. The emotional bond had fully dissolved into a dry, bureaucratic footnote. Publishing the statement was an act of self-definition. The public had seen the headlines about the fraud. Now they saw the definitive closure. This shifted the narrative control entirely to me. I wasn't the bitter daughter, I was the professional who established clean boundaries following a criminal breach of trust. My relationship with them now was officially the same as my relationship with any other defunct client, non-existent. It was the hardest decision of my life, but the easiest business decision I ever made. Their final accountability was not only financial but also the definitive loss of their only clean asset, me. What was the single, most important truth about family duty I want you to take away from this story? And what final piece of advice can secure your financial future from emotional manipulation? The question wasn't if the relationship was over, but how to formally document its non-existence. Sarah and I drafted a brief, public statement. It wasn't accusatory, it was purely informational. It simply stated that all previous familial relationships involving Victor, Eliza, and Jocelyn Connolly were now legally and financially severed. The document was a firewall, not a weapon. Reading it, I felt a deep, chilling detachment. They were no longer my family but parties in a complex legal matter. The emotional bond had fully dissolved into a dry, bureaucratic footnote. Publishing the statement was an act of self-definition. The public had seen the headlines about the fraud. Now they saw the definitive closure. This shifted the narrative control entirely to me. I wasn't the bitter daughter, I was the professional who established clean boundaries following a criminal breach of trust. My relationship with them now was officially the same as my relationship with any other defunct client, non-existent. It was the hardest decision of my life, but the easiest business decision I ever made. Their final accountability was not only financial but also the definitive loss of their only clean asset, me. What was the single, most important truth about family duty I want you to take away from this story? And what final piece of advice can secure your financial future from emotional manipulation? My financial life was secured, but the story wasn't truly over until I could turn the pain into purpose. My new responsibility wasn't just to myself, but to the next generation of professionals. I started lecturing, focusing on the ethics of finance and the true cost of moral hazard. Teaching wasn't just a side job, it was my final act of revenge, a commitment to ensure others didn't fall into the same toxic traps. Seeing the focused faces of the students, I realized this was my new legacy, sharing the hard-won wisdom of my hostile takeover. I was drafting my opening slide. The title wasn't Fraud and Family, but Integrity, the best long-term investment. My life was proof that character, not cash, is the ultimate indicator of sustainable wealth. The money Victor and Eliza stole was transactional, the confidence I now inspire is generational. My greatest professional accomplishment wasn't leading the new division, it was building a life where I could speak this truth without fear of consequence. My final mission, to empower others to see their self-worth as their most valuable asset. The past was a cautionary tale, the future was a masterclass in self-determination. I thought the ledger was closed, but there was one last, pathetic attempt. A burner phone text message arrived, likely from Jocelyn, reading, "Your lectures are hurting Dad's reputation." Help us stop this. It was the perfect bookend to the entire saga. They still believed their reputation was more important than my integrity. I didn't feel anger, I felt nothing. I simply took a screenshot for Sarah's file, deleted the message, and blocked the number. The no contact order and my own boundaries were the final defense. My response was silence and my continued, successful work. I maintained absolute control. This leads to the ultimate moral of the story. Your career and sanity are directly linked to the emotional liabilities you carry. The single decision to prioritize my ethical foundation over my familial fear saved my life. My greatest victory wasn't the money the SEC recovered, it was the unquantifiable return on investment in my peace of mind. Let their chaos be a cautionary tale, not your destiny. You have the right to fire anyone, even family, who poses a persistent, systemic threat to your financial and mental well-being. Build your own empire. Be your own CEO. Don't let toxic debt be your legacy. Now that you have the blueprint for your own hostile takeover, what is the very first step you're going to take this week to secure your financial freedom? Let me know in the comments below. The story of my family's betrayal and my calculated revenge is extreme, but the moral is universal. It's about more than just money, it's about self-ownership. If you take one thing from this entire saga, let it be this: Lesson 1, your self-worth is not tied to your family's approval. I wasted years seeking validation that was never coming. Lesson 2, emotional boundaries are financial firewalls. The moment I put distance between us, their ability to drain my resources evaporated. Lesson 3, integrity is the best long-term investment. It attracts the right allies and keeps the wrong ones away. You have the power to draw a line. Don't wait for a crisis to define your terms. Lesson 4, the cost of confrontation is always less than the cost of silent compliance. Speaking up, getting legal counsel, and filing the complaint were terrifying, but the debt I paid in stress was nothing compared to the decades of debt I would have carried in shame and silence. Lesson 5, you owe your future self financial freedom. That is your highest duty. Don't let guilt be a cosigner on your life. If you feel that toxic pull, treat it as a hostile takeover attempt on your sanity and fight back with professionalism and precision. These are the true dividends of my revenge story. Now that you have the 5 key lessons, which one are you going to implement today to secure your future? Hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below.